All right, everyone, welcome.
Hey, this is Graham on the mic.
And this is Ashkahn. I'm also on a mic.
Different mic, though.
Yeah.
It's not like we're just sharing the same mic here.
Oh, no, it's a professional setup.
Today's question is, it feels bad when I see 30 minutes left on the timer and I hear the shower. Is this normal? I just opened, so it seems to happen maybe 1 out of 10 floats.
Well, I wonder how long their floats are, I guess, is my first question.
Oh, that is a good question. Yeah, because if they're 30-minute floats, then man, well, I guess that's just totally normal, right? Like 30 minutes before the end, they need to shower off to get in. So,
so let's assume I have a 60 or 90, something like that, right?
Yep. And let's also, so I assume they're talking about people getting out early.
Yeah, let's just getting out early in general.
Yeah,
that's what their question is.
As opposed to just showering off because they got salt in their eye and they're getting back in the tank or something.
Yeah.
Because that happens too with showers kicking
So
on.
yeah, should you feel bad about people getting out early? It definitely happens. Like, people get out early. I mean, we were on 90-minute floats, and people will get out sometimes around the 60-minute mark. I'm not sure I'd say 1 out of 10.
Yeah, I think a little less frequently.
Than that, but it still happens with some amount of regularity. And I guess I don't personally find that always means they had a bad experience or anything. Like, sometimes you just feel like you're done, like you got a good float and you're feeling good and you kind of like game to the point where you're ready to get out. And that point maybe doesn't line up with the music or the exact length of the float.
In fact, I'd say almost more often than not, if they're... so let's take a 90-minute float, for example, and just assume that that's the question.
Right.
If they're floating 90 minutes and they get 60 minutes in and then they kind of leave, I think more often than not, it's because they had a pretty good experience and they just sort of feel like they're done in there or something like that, Or they got cold, and there's kind of all of those other common complaints and
Sometimes
stuff like that.
There's like a small inconvenience that just kind of, they're just like, I'm kind of done trying to like sit here and be cold.
But there's a shocking number of times when we've checked in with people who get out early, which I guess to speak to that too is, like, those are great candidates for really finding out why they got out of the tank early and what happened, So anytime someone's coming out when it's not when you turned on the music, you definitely want to be catching them and, politely asking, just sort of checking in to make sure everything's okay. But again, when we've done that at Float On, I think, honestly, more often than not, a lot of people just say, no, there was nothing wrong. Like, I just felt like it was my time to get out of the tank. Even Derek White was just telling me recently he goes through phases, and recently it's almost every float he gets out after 60 minutes because he just feels like he's done. You
hit that spot.
And we've had members who do that, and they don't feel bad or like we will often ask if people want half off or if something went wrong or something, and a lot of our members are just like, no, I just felt like it was a 60-minute float day.
And sometimes it is because people they weren't quite getting there and they were a little tired of sitting in there. And so, like, for those people, I guess the most common thing I find is that they were just really having trouble kind of letting go and relaxing into it. And I'll often recommend trying to float at a different time to them. Like, if they're real high strung or, constantly in their own head, stuff like that. Sometimes I find people floating in the middle of the afternoon when they have trouble unwinding in the first place is kind of a tough time for them to float because it's their brain's still really active and they're really like, gung-ho about everything. And I'll recommend they try coming in at like 9 p.m. or something later in the night when their body is more in the kind of wind down sort of mode. And that seems to make a difference. When people come in, all of a sudden, like, it's a little bit easier for them to let go and get into it, and they will stay in that entire time, and they'll actually kind of get that float experience that they didn't maybe quite hit during their previous float.
There's something else that's weird too, which is I feel like if people get out early, it's really like it's important to let them know that it's not their fault or that
Yeah,
they
it's
didn't
kind
do
of
something
they're like
wrong.
embarrassed usually.
It's
Like,
amazing how guilty people feel,
Uh-huh.
or like
I
they
feel like
know
they
that.
couldn't handle it. Or
Yeah, like I've known people who get out early and sit in their room because they're too embarrassed to come out of the
uh-huh.
room and kind of let the staff member know that they didn't make it the entire time, or they almost feel like they failed at floating.
Yeah, so you got to let people know that they're weak when they do that, and that they should feel ashamed, and they're not real floaters.
Put a note on their account; they're never allowed back in.
Yeah,
But no, so like make them understand that that's. I mean, just even saying that there's a number of other clients who just find that after certain floats that 60 minutes is enough time, or that even half an hour is just all they needed that day, and put them at ease. I think is an important part of that customer service.
half an hour is a little like if you're running 60-minute floats and people are getting out at the 30-minute mark. I feel like that's a little
1 out of every 10.
like that's like I feel like it's hard in 30 minutes to like get to the spot where you're like, great, good float. Like I feel like you know what I mean, for with that amount of frequency.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd agree with that. And it's one like just
That actually does feel a little bit unusual to me.
and
If you have 1 out of 10 people getting out after 30 minutes, that's not quite in line with what I've experienced. Or
sizing people up is just so important, right? Like if they're getting out and they're yelling at you because they had a miserable float and things were too noisy and the temperature wasn't right, then obviously something needs to change and they're not having a good experience,
yeah,
right?
I bet temperature has a lot to do with it. It's just it can be distracting and it can stop people from really getting into the zone if they're feeling really cold or something.
Noise can be a lot of it. Yeah, just again, personal things that people had going on can be a lot of it too. So, yeah, I mean, be prepared. Like, I think letting people know that there's nothing wrong with getting out early, making sure that everything was okay with the float, and being ready to give a half off or full free float or a refund if something was wrong to kind of appease the situation, and just kind of winging it from there, but certainly checking in is probably the best protocol.
Yeah, let us know. Get back to us. Tell us what people say when
Yeah,
you
and
ask them.
tell us whether you're talking about 60 minutes or 90 minutes, because that definitely affects the answer here.
Uh-huh.
But thanks for the question. And for you listeners who didn't ask that question, which I think is the majority, you can go to floatanksolutions.com/podcast. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. You go on over there and you send us in a question.
And we're going to answer it.
Bam.